Once upon a time, at the edge of a peaceful village, there stood a small cottage with a blue door and a roof covered in moss. A kind couple lived there. Behind their cottage was a tall stone wall, and beyond that wall was the most beautiful garden anyone had ever seen in the whole wide world. The garden belonged to an old woman named Tabitha, who knew the names of every flower, herb, tree, and bird in the valley. Her garden was not frightening or mysterious. It was quiet and carefully tended. Lavender grew beside winding paths. Pear trees leaned over verdant beds of mint. White roses climbed wooden arches, and a clear spring flowed between smooth grey stones. Near the centre of the garden grew a patch of green leaves called Rapunzel. The leaves were tender and fresh, and they shone with drops of morning dew. The woman in the cottage often looked at the garden through a small opening in the wall. She loved the peaceful sight of the herbs moving in the breeze. One afternoon, Tabitha saw her looking. "You may come into the garden," Tabitha said warmly. "There is enough here to share." From then on, the couple visited often. They helped water the flowers, gather herbs, and sweep the pathways. In time, the couple had a baby daughter. Because the green Rapunzel leaves had brought the families together, they named the child Rapunzel. Rapunzel grew into a cheerful child with bright eyes and long golden hair. She spent many days in Tabitha's garden. Tabitha taught her how to recognize time by its gentle scent. She showed her how moonflowers opened at dusk and how bees returned to their hives when the evening air grew cool. Rapunzel learned to make small bundles of lavender. She pressed flowers between the pages of old books and placed bowls of water beneath the trees for birds. Her parents' cottage was always nearby. At night, she slept beneath a patchwork quilt while the wind moved softly through the grass outside. As Rapunzel grew older, Tabitha became her teacher. They read stories together. They studied the stars. They mixed fragrant oils from rose petals and herbs. Rapunzel's hair grew longer each year. It fell below her waist, then to her knees, and finally almost to the ground. Every morning, she brushed it slowly. Tabitha braided it with ribbons, flowers, or soft pieces of blue cloth. Rapunzel never minded the time it took. The brushing was calm and familiar. She liked the quiet sound of the wooden comb passing through her hair. Beyond the garden was a broad meadow surrounded by gentle hills. In the center of the meadow stood an old round tower. The tower had once been used by people who watched the stars. It had a curved roof, pale stone walls, and a wide room at the top. When Rapunzel was older, she and Tabitha repaired the tower and turned it into a peaceful place for reading and painting. There was a door at the bottom and a round window at the top. A wooden staircase wound around the inside. Rapunzel loved spending afternoons there. The highest room held a bed, a writing desk, a shelf of books, and a comfortable chair beside the window. Clay pots filled with rosemary and violets stood along the walls. From the window, Rapunzel could see the village, the garden, the distant forest, and the silver ribbon of a river. Sometimes she lowered a basket from the window with a long rope. Tabitha placed bread, fruit, and fresh flowers inside. Rapunzel pulled the basket up, laughing as it swayed in the breeze. Her golden braid often hung beside it, shining in the sunlight. Travelers who saw her from the road sometimes believed she used her hair as a ladder. But Rapunzel always used the stairs. Hair, Tabitha often said, was meant to be cared for gently. One spring evening, A young musician named Eric walked through the meadow. He carried a small wooden harp on his back. Eric travelled between villages, playing quiet songs at markets, inns and garden gatherings. He preferred gentle melodies that sounded like rain, wind, or bird song. As he passed the tower, he heard Rapunzel singing beside the open window. Her song floated across the meadow. It had no words. It was simply a soft melody she had invented while watching the clouds. Eric sat beneath a linden tree and listened. When the song ended, he played the melody back to her on his harp. Rapunzel looked down and smiled. "You remembered it," she called. "It was a beautiful tune," Eric replied. They began to play together. Rapunzel sang from the tower room while Eric played beneath the tree. The notes rose and fell in the evening air. Birds rested on the branches. Rabbits appeared near the long grass. Even the breeze seemed to grow quieter. Before Eric left, Rapunzel lowered a basket containing bread, pears, and a small bundle of lavender. Eric placed a folded page of music inside and sent the basket back up. Eric returned many times. Sometimes he brought new songs. Sometimes he brought books from distant towns. Rapunzel showed him her paintings by lowering them in the basket. She painted moonlit hills, bright gardens, and small cottages with warm windows. Eventually, Tabitha invited Eric into the tower. They shared tea in the round room while sunlight moved across the floor. Eric told stories of quiet lakes, mountain villages, and orchards beside the sea. Rapunzel listened with interest. She loved the garden and the tower, but she also wondered what it would be like to see those places for herself. "There is no need to hurry," Tabitha said. "The world will still be there when you are ready." Rapunzel nodded. She liked that thought. She could travel one day. She could remain at home another day. There was room for both. When summer arrived, Rapunzel decided to walk with Eric to the nearby village. She brushed her hair, divided it into 2 long braids, and tied them with green ribbons. Tabitha packed bread, cheese, berries, and mint water into a basket. The 3 of them left the meadow in the cool morning light. They followed a path beside the river. Rapunzel noticed everything. She watched sunlight shimmer on the water. She heard sheep bells on the hillside. She smelled pine trees warming beneath the sun. The village was calm and welcoming. There were flower boxes beneath the windows and pale ribbons hanging above the square. Eric played his harp beside a fountain. Rapunzel sang the meadow song. People gathered quietly to listen. No one shouted or pushed. Children sat on the smooth stones. Bakers stood in their doorways. An old dog slept beneath a bench. When the music ended, the villagers gave Rapunzel flowers. She carried them home in her basket as the afternoon light turned golden. A few weeks later, Tabitha held a small celebration in the garden. Lanterns hung from the rose arches. Long tables were covered with fresh bread, honey cakes, apples, and bowls of herbs. Rapunzel's parents came from the cottage. Eric arrived with his harp. Neighbours from the village brought blankets and cushions. As evening fell, the moonflowers began to open. Their white petals seemed to glow beneath the rising moon. Rapunzel wore a simple lavender dress. Her hair was woven into one long braid, decorated with tiny white blossoms. She walked through the garden, greeting every guest. Later, she and Eric played the song they had created together. The melody drifted among the trees. People rested beneath the branches and watched the lanterns sway. Rapunzel looked around at the garden, the cottage, the tower, and the people she loved. She understood that home was not one room or one place. Home was the feeling of being safe, welcomed, and remembered. That night, Rapunzel returned to the tower. She climbed the winding staircase slowly. At the top, she opened the round window and looked across the meadow. The last lanterns glowed in Tabitha's garden. The village lights shone softly beyond the river. Stars filled the dark blue sky. Rapunzel changed into a white linen nightdress. She sat before her mirror and removed the flowers from her braid one by one. Then she brushed her hair. The wooden comb moved gently through each golden strand. Slowly the long day began to fade from her thoughts. She remembered the music beneath the trees. She remembered the cool river, the moonflowers, and the warm voices in the garden. When her hair was smooth, she braided it loosely and placed it beside her pillow. Tabitha entered, carrying a cup of warm milk with honey. She set it on the table and pulled the quilt back from the bed. Rapunzel climbed beneath the covers. The sheets felt cool and clean. The pillow smelled faintly of lavender. Outside, the meadow grew still. Eric's final harp melody drifted from the garden, quiet and distant. Rapunzel listened until the last note disappeared into the night. Tabitha closed the shutters halfway, leaving a narrow space for the moonlight. A silver beam rested across the floor. The rosemary plants moved gently on the windowsill. Rapunzel felt safe in the tower. She felt loved in the garden below. The night had wrapped the meadow in silence. The tower stones held the warmth of the day. The stars watched quietly above the hills. Rapunzel closed her eyes. Her golden braid rested beside her like a soft ribbon, and while the moonflowers swayed beneath the window, she drifted into a deep and peaceful sleep.